Kirusu was a certified virgin loser who was forced by the government to participate in a demi-human marriage program. However, instead of finding a wife, his agent spammed him with clingy monster girls who all want to get freaky with him. One morning, Kirusu awoke to find that Mia was wrapped around him. When he questioned her, she told him she was trying to get warm. When he offered to run her a bath, the rip-off Medusa pulled him closer and almost suffocated him with her milkers. To save himself from certain death, Kirusu pulled on her tail, which caused her floodgates to burst open. After that impromptu water slide session, Kirusu got Mia's bath ready and found himself trying to imagine how she used the toilet since he was a disgusting pig. The next moment, Mia came in shirtless, and this cultured fool turned to Sanji instantly. He tried to eat after she got in the bath, but the sneaky vixen pulled him into the tub with her and tried to make him give her some of his milk. Having no choice, he turned on the shower, and while she was distracted, he rushed out. Later on, while he was setting the table for breakfast, Agent Smith, his inter-spices exchange coordinator, suddenly appeared out of nowhere, scaring him. She claimed she'd come to do her routine checks to ensure that he hadn't violated any of the interspecies exchange laws. The most important law was that humans weren't allowed to hurt demi-humans, and if they did, they would be punished severely. Kirusu ignored the woman as she yapped, so she got closer and whispered into his ear that making Mia a woman was also considered breaking the law. Kirusu assured her that he would never attempt to parallel park the snake girl, but Smith didn't believe him and warned that if he did, he'd end up behind bars while Mia would be sent back home. She then approached him and began teasing him, saying she was sure he wouldn't be able to resist Mia's feminine charms. Suddenly, he was yanked away by Mia, who didn't appreciate how close Smith was to him. Smith asked her to calm down and swore she wasn't interested in Kirusu's tiny pickle. She left shortly after, and a curious Mia asked Kirusu if the interspecies exchange laws were really that important, and he told her that they were. Surprisingly, Mia said she didn't give a flying fudge about the laws, and told him that if he wanted a taste of her peaches, she'd give it to him because she loved him. To prove her point, she pushed him to the floor and wrapped her body around his after unzipping his pants, but before she could kiss him, he cried out because she'd wrapped herself too tightly around him and dislocated his shoulder. Thankfully, Smith returned to help him reset it, while Mia cried hysterically because she felt bad about what she'd done. Later that day, he took Mia shopping, but the girl got carried away and pulled him into a store which sold lingerie. Kirusu tried to run away after seeing this, but Mia pulled him back and reminded him that Smith had said he wasn't allowed to leave her alone. Having no choice, he stayed, and as he waited, he stupidly began wondering if Mia could wear underwear. His thoughts were disturbed by Mia, who came to ask his opinion on what type of melon cover she should get. She also pulled down her shirt to show him that she wasn't wearing one at that moment, and the homeboy lost another pint of blood. After he recovered, he asked Mia to try them on and see for herself, but instead of responding, she grabbed his hand and pulled him along. Once they were alone and she began taking off her shirt, he realized things were escalating too quickly. Deciding he'd had enough excitement for one day, he bolted out of the room. Once outside, he noticed he was holding a small triangular piece of fabric, which he couldn't remember grabbing. As he wondered what it was, Mia popped her head out and shyly asked for her underwear back. When he failed to respond because of shock, she pulled it out of his hands and returned to the dressing room. However, he foolishly made a comment which made her toss him out of the window. On their way home, they encountered an obnoxious couple who immediately started mocking them. Mia, furious, tried to strike them with her tail, but Kirusu stepped in just in time to stop her. When she asked why he got in the way, he reminded her of the legal consequences for harming a human. Soon, a crowd gathered, and onlookers began taking photos of Mia. Feeling overwhelmed and exposed, she pleaded with Kirusu to take her somewhere private. With limited options, they ended up seeking refuge in a nearby love motel. This was a bad idea because Mia went to take a shower, and when she emerged from the bathroom, he struggled to keep his sausage in its pack. The worst part was that Mia tried to convince him to clap her, and he would have given in if Smith and her agents hadn't burst into the room. She had received information that a human and a demi-human were trying to reach the Milky Way together, but when she realized it was Kirusu and Mia, she relaxed and took them downstairs. There, they ran into the annoying couple again, and they wasted no time in throwing insults at them again. Annoyed, Mia tried to attack them again, but Kirusu was faster, and he punched the man so hard he flew and hit his girlfriend. Later on, at Kirusu's house, Smith bandaged his hand, which he injured because he punched that misconstructed gorilla in the face, and when he screamed in pain, she told him to suck it up. After she left, Mia asked Kurusu why he had attacked the couple, and he explained that he couldn't stand to see people mistreat women. Hearing this made her happy, and out of excitement, she jumped on him, and, while he struggled against her, she took off his shirt and suggested that they finish what they started earlier. Unfortunately, Smith returned at that moment to ask what was for dinner, halting Mia's plans to get her freak on. Days later, while Mia and Kurusu were hanging up the laundry, Kurusu was suddenly snatched up by a bird person and found himself on a tree branch in a park. His kidnapper introduced herself as Pappy, and after she dragged him to get an ice cream for her, Kurusu asked her questions about herself. Pappy told him that she'd run away from her host family and had been on her own ever since, which surprised him because from their conversation, he'd deduced that she was dumber than Patrick and SpongeBob combined. He told her that running away from her host family was the wrong thing to do and said if she was caught, she'd be deported immediately. Upon hearing this, Pappy became shocked and accidentally dropped her ice cream, so she started crying since she hadn't tasted it yet. Kurusu comforted her and offered her his popsicle, but instantly regretted this decision because Pappy was on her knees between his legs and to those around, it looked like she was licking his lollipop. Feeling embarrassed, he pulled the popsicle out of her mouth and told her she needed to clean herself up. But when he turned around, she had already taken her clothes off and had gotten into the fountain. He tried to get her out, but Pappy used the opportunity to pull him in, asking him to play with her. That was the moment Mia arrived and accused Pappy of trying to steal her man, causing the two to get into a catfight with poor Kurusu in the middle. However, no one paid attention to them because they were all focused on the little girl who was stuck in a tree. When Pappy saw this, she attempted to fly up and get the girl, but couldn't because her wings were wet, so Mia decided to play the hero to impress Kurusu. As she slid her way up the tree, she got smacked in the face multiple times by the tree branches and got leaves stuck in her hair and on her face. This made her look worse than a scarecrow crow, so when the child saw her, she screamed in fear and fell off the tree. Thankfully, Pappy caught her mid-air, but because her wings were still wet, they both dropped like a sack of bricks and landed on poor Kurusu. After the commotion, the police arrived to take their statements, and when he asked where Pappy's host family was, Kurusu told them he was the one. The man then asked for Pappy's ID, which Kurusu didn't have, and just as they were sure they were going to get caught in their lie, Smith showed up and presented Pappy's ID to the officer. Later at Kurusu's house, he asked Smith why she had Pappy's ID, and she explained that Pappy had run away from her while she'd been on her way to drop Pappy off at his house. Hearing how nonchalant Smith sounded made Kurusu wonder how she still had a job because she was more or less a dark-haired Sakura. Returning his attention to what Smith was saying, he heard her tell Pappy that she'd be living with Kurusu, and the girl became excited. After she promised to behave and be a good girl for him, she demanded that he bathe her and pulled him to the bathroom. Once they were gone, Smith asked Mia if she was truly fine with sharing Kurusu with Pappy, and she answered that she was because Pappy was just a kid. This prompted Smith to reveal that Mia and Pappy were the same age, and almost immediately, Mia rushed to the bathroom to stop Kurusu from bathing Pappy, accidentally hitting Kurusu with the door. Days later, while Kurusu was on his way home, he was knocked down by a female centaur who asked if he was the man destined to be her master before he passed out. When his lights came back on, he called Smith to ask about the sword-wielding Amazonian centaur, and she told him that the girl, whose name was Centaurea, had been permitted to pick her host family since it was her people's tradition to pick their masters themselves. After Smith hung up, Kurusu began conversing with a girl, but they were interrupted when a purse snatcher on a scooter nearly hit them. Centaurea quickly pulled Kurusu out of the way, and he ended up with his face stuck between her glorious melons. When he was set free from his memory prison, he said that the man was the one who had been snatching purses in the area, so Centaurea decided that she'd become the friendly neighborhood Sentra and catch the man. She asked Kurusu to assist her, and he agreed, but when he attempted to hop on her back, she kicked him in the face and said only her master could ride her. A little while later, after sorting out the riding issue, they caught up with the thief, but he sped up when Centaurea ordered him to surrender. As the chase turned into a high-speed one, the man tried to slow them down by driving through some water bottles that were being delivered. Centaurea sliced them with her sword and got drenched with the water while poor Kurusu kept screaming like a scared little girl. Seeing that Centaurea wasn't giving up, the man switched lanes, so she jumped on the back of a truck and continued to chase after him. Her little stunt helped her catch the man faster. But as she held him at sword point, Kurusu suddenly grabbed onto her jugs, causing her to scream at him to let go. Kurusu ignored the screaming banshee as all he was focused on was trying not to fall off. But this caused him to accidentally open her shirt and flash the cultured man her melons. Immediately, he got a nosebleed, lost control, and crashed into some boxes of paint while Centuria kept running until she ran smack into a garage door. Embarrassed, she swore to deal with Kurusu, but when she reached for her sword, it was gone. Just then, the thief walked up to her holding her sword and tried to slash her. However, Kurusu, trusting in his plot armor, jumped in the way and got cut in the process. Back at his house, a bandaged Kurusu explained what had happened to Smith over the phone. Fortunately, the sword was a fake, so he wasn't seriously injured. Smith told him he was stupid for trying to catch the thief, but he argued that it was Centuria's idea to chase after the scooter, so she asked if he'd ridden on Centuria's back. Not giving him a chance to answer, she went on to explain that if Centuria had willingly allowed it, then it was fine, but if he'd done so without her consent, then it was the same thing as defiling her. Just then, Kurusu noticed Centuria hiding behind the door and immediately dropped to his knees and begged her to forgive his ignorance. Centuria said it was his fault instead and then thanked him for saving her life, after which she swore her loyalty to him. Just as she asked him to become her master, Mia and Pappy barged in, halting his response. Mia demanded to know who Centuria was, while Pappy just asked if there was any food. Days after Centuria moved in, Mia gathered the girls in the living room under the pretext of reviewing the interspecies exchange bill. The real truth was that she wanted to make it clear to her fellow housemates that Kurusu was hers and tried to twist the interspecies law in her favor, but Centuria wasn't having it. Their argument halted when Kurusu, spotting a fresh hoof print on his face, walked in to inform Centuria that Smith wanted her to fill out her homestay application. Immediately, Mia started chewing Centuria out, but Kurusu stepped in, explaining that she hadn't hurt him intentionally. It so happened that he accidentally walked in on her in the bathroom, and she reacted by giving him a temporary face tattoo. After his explanation, he apologized to Centuria again, and as they each tried to take the blame for what happened, Mia came between them, and the girls started arguing. When Kurusu attempted to intervene, he got slapped, so he turned his attention to Pappy, who had smoke coming out of her head because she'd attempted to read. Hoping to preserve whatever brain cells she had left, Kurusu suggested she take a bath, but she pleaded with him to join her. When they got to the bathroom, Kurusu provided Pappy with a swimsuit because he didn't want to catch a case, but while helping her put it on, he accidentally touched her plots. The next moment, blood began gushing out of his nose like it was a fountain, and because the pressure was so strong, he flew into the bathtub. Clueless about his near brush with death, Pappy jumped in the tub and used him as a flotation device. She began talking and told him that she considered him to be her big brother. But when she suddenly placed his hands on her plots, Kurusu wondered what in the Sweet Home Alabama was happening. He tried to pull away, but she didn't let him and tried to kiss him, so he struggled harder to break free. Fortunately, Centuria showed up the next moment and went all green arrow on Pappy, pinning her to the wall. She then instructed Kurusu to climb onto her back, and as she rushed out, Mia attempted to stop them, but Centuria trampled on her. She didn't stop until she got to a park, and after catching his breath, Kurusu thanked her for saving him. She answered that it was her duty as his servant to serve and protect him, but Kurusu advised her to let loose a little. Since he wasn't prepared to return home yet, Kurusu asked Centuria what she wanted to do, and she shyly asked if they could hold hands because she noticed the couple who walked past doing it. Kurusu didn't respond immediately, so she assumed he didn't want to do it, but he surprised her by suddenly grabbing her hand. When she began blushing and refusing to look at him, Kurusu tried to get her to talk, but they were interrupted by Mia, who suddenly dropped out of the sky and began scolding Pappy for dropping her like she was cargo. Centuria asked why they had left home, as it was prohibited for demi-humans to go out without their host families. Mia told her not to get her panties in a twist and was in the process of defending their actions when she noticed Kurusu was nestled between Centuria's natural pillows. Overcome with jealousy, Mia pulled him away and accused Centuria of kidnapping him so she could seduce him. They soon began pulling the poor boy back and forth between them, so Pappy joined in, thinking it was a game, and pulled Kurusu's face to her flat chest. Just then, Smith showed up and tried putting the girls to sleep with a tranquilizer gun, but accidentally shot Kurusu instead. He regained consciousness at home later, and when he saw Smith, he asked where the girls were. Just as Smith pointed towards the closed door, the girls rushed in and started apologizing and blaming themselves. He told them not to do so, as the only person to blame was the incompetent Smith, who assumed she was as good a shot as the almighty Deadshot himself. He told the girls they were family, and when Smith heard it, she revealed that Kurusu would have to marry one of the girls because the exchange bill had been amended, and they needed someone to test run it. That night, Kurusu lay in bed, unable to fall asleep because he kept replaying Smith's words in his mind. Just then, Mia knocked on the door. She expressed her concern for him, noting that he looked disturbed, and asked if it was because he didn't want to marry a demi-human. Kurusu admitted that he was unsure how to handle the marriage situation since he had never been in a relationship before. Mia was relieved to hear that he had no objections to marrying one of them, and then slid into the room to try and make plot with him. Before she could begin, Pappy burst in through the window, knocking Mia off Kurusu in the process and taking her place. The confused Kurusu noticed that Pappy wasn't properly dressed and tried to get her to cover up, but she refused. Just as she pulled down his pants to release his drill, Centuria kicked the door down, halting her actions. Kurusu thanked her for coming to his rescue and asked if she knew why Mia and Pappy were acting the way they were. Centuria explained that during a full moon, demi-humans always went into heat. This prompted him to ask how she was unaffected, and she claimed that she'd mastered the act of desire suppression. However, the next moment, she placed Kurusu's hands on her milk jugs, and when he pulled them away, she tried to entice him further by unbuttoning her shirt. Seeing her plots without armor caused Kurusu to have a nosebleed, but he decided to leave when he noticed that Pappy and Mia had regained consciousness. While hiding in the kitchen, he got a call from Smith, who said she'd forgotten to tell him about the full moon. Kurusu told the incompetent woman to shove her warning and concerns up her back cheeks because he was too busy trying to prevent his V-card from getting swiped. Ignoring his rudeness, Smith asked if he'd decided which girl he was going to get hitched to, and he told her that he hadn't. This made her tell him to stop being a coward like Usup and make a decision to avoid problems with the girls. She then advised him to find some ice cubes and use them to cool the girls down. But as he was searching the fridge, the girls found him and immediately jumped on him. They only pulled back when they noticed the red stain on the floor and assumed they had hurt him. However, when Kurusu stood up, they realized he'd fallen on the ketchup bottle. He assured them that he was fine, and just when they thought he had finally calmed down, they tried to milk him again. The next morning, Kurusu woke the girls up and said they needed to talk. When the girls saw him, they were shocked and asked if he was okay. He replied that he was fine and shared that he had decided to date each of them with marriage in mind before unexpectedly collapsing. That night, when Mia came downstairs, she went to the kitchen to see what Kurusu had made for dinner and got attacked by a slime. Later, as she lay on the couch with a washcloth over her head, Kurusu wondered out loud what had attacked her, and Centuria informed him that it was one of Rimuru's relatives. Kurusu was surprised, as he didn't know there were slime monsters, so Centuria explained that slimes were one of the many species unrecognized by humans. Just as Centuria promised to defend him from any slime attacks, the slime emerged from the water bowl Kurusu had been using. Centuria tried to slice it with her sword, but it dodged her blade. The slime then attacked both her and Kurusu, leaving them in a sticky mess on the floor. However, Kurusu quickly took off to the bathroom after noticing Centuria's appearance because it was giving him some unholy thoughts. While there, he wondered if he should call Smith and inform her about his new tenant. But that thought vanished when Centuria knocked on the door and asked if she could join him. Not thinking of the implications, he told her that she could, so the horse baddie came in after taking off her clothes. Her appearance surprised him, but she assured him that she wasn't trying to wake his little soldier, as all she wanted was to be there to protect him in case the slime showed up. When she moved, she accidentally slipped because of the slime and landed on Kurusu, giving him a face full of her watermelons. However, she pushed aside her embarrassment and admitted that she needed help washing the slime off her body. Being a gentleman, Kurusu agreed to help her, but as he scrubbed her body, Centuria suddenly asked him to stop because his hands were touching her peaches. When he realized his mistake, he decided to wash a different part of her body, but ended up groping her plots instead. Since things were getting out of hand, they decided to move to the bath, and while soaking in it, Kurusu expressed his curiosity about what the slime wanted. Centuria said it was looking for water, prompting Kurush to point out that they were currently sitting in the largest water source in the house. Just as he suggested leaving, he noticed the slime watching them from the ceiling. Centuria immediately reached for her sword, forgetting they were in the bath, and accidentally grabbed Kurusu's joystick. Realizing what she'd done, she moved back in shock and accidentally fell out of the bath, hitting her head. The slime then wrapped its tentacles around Kurusu, prompting him to beg it not to eat him. But instead of devouring him, the slime morphed into a female form, catching him off guard. She rubbed her body against his face before washing him, making him realize that she was mimicking what Centuria had been doing earlier. Kurusu tried talking to her, but she didn't respond, leading him to assume she couldn't talk. As she pushed his head into her body, Kurusu started struggling to breathe, and eventually, he jumped into the bath. Later, after all the commotion, they went downstairs, and Centuria praised Kurusu. For some reason, she believed the dumb idiot had jumped into the bath because he had deduced that the water would dilute the slime and set him free. Kurusu remarked that it had been a gamble because, for all he knew, the slime could have absorbed all the water and transformed into a kaiju. When he mentioned her human form, Centuria and Mia were surprised, stating that they had never heard of a slime capable of taking on a human appearance. Kurusu then suggested that they inform Smith about her to avoid any issues, but as they turned, they noticed the slime playing with Pappy. The next day, Kurusu had to intervene when Centuria and Mia tried to attack the slime because it took their stuff and covered them in slime. Pappy, who referred to the slime as Sue, also defended it, asserting that she hadn't intentionally messed with their belongings. Confused, Kurusu demanded an explanation, so Pappy explained that she had named the slime Sue. The next moment, Sue repeated the name, startling Mia, who hadn't expected a creature everyone believed lacked intelligence to speak. Kurusu had to clarify that Sue was good at mimicking what she observed and heard. Centuria then said that they needed to get clothes for Sue, so Kurusu provided her with a raincoat and rain boots since those were the only items that wouldn't absorb water. While Sue was distracted by Pappy, Centuria and Mia pulled Kurusu aside and told him that if they didn't report the slime, they would be in trouble. Kurusu argued that since no one had ever seen a slime before, there was no guarantee that she would be returned to her home. As he contemplated the situation, Kurusu heard Pappy flying off with Sue and decided to follow them. He tracked them down to the riverside, where Sue noticed the water and began to struggle, causing Pappy to drop her right on top of Kurusu. After landing, Pappy asked why she had done that, and Kurusu explained it was because Sue was scared the water would wash her away. Kurusu then inquired why Pappy had run off, to which she replied that it was because she had overheard them planning to get her arrested. Even though she hadn't done anything wrong, Kurusu said it was because they were worried Sue was dangerous since she'd almost isekai'd him. But Pappy reminded him that he had also almost died at the hands of the others. While they were still talking, a group of kids approached and invited Pappy to play with them, so Kurusu allowed it. As she ran off to play with the children, Kurusu stood back and watched, noticing that Sue even joined in at one point. When they moved to the roadside to continue playing, one of the kids walked into the street to pick up her hat just as Kurusu spotted Truck-kun making his way down the road. Unfortunately, he was too far away to do it, but Sue grabbed her and used her body to reduce the impact of the truck. The girl thanked Sue for saving her life, but then they realized Sue was stuck and couldn't move. When the wall finally gave way, she fell with it. Pappy reached out to catch her, but Sue let go of her hand and dropped. For a moment, Pappy thought she'd lost her friend until she heard Sue's voice. Rushing to the edge of the bridge, they looked down and saw Sue lying safely in the back of a truck. It seemed Kurusu had managed to drive it into place just in time to catch her. They finally bid farewell to the children, and Kurusu called home to inform Mia and Centuria that he was bringing Sue back with him, but warned them not to let Smith know about Sue's existence. He hung up when Mia attempted to tell him something, and when they got home, he came face to face with Smith. This made Mia call for an emergency meeting to discuss what to do with Sue now that Smith had seen her. Kurusu asked why she was suddenly trying to help Sue when she wanted her gone before, so Mia explained that she didn't mind her staying since there was no way an improper life form could steal him from her. Just then, the Interspecies Exchange Security Service arrived to remodel the house, but the girls assumed they had come to take Sue away, so they took her and dipped. At the park where they went to stay, Pappy questioned if it was wise of them to be out without Kurusu. This made them realize that they had acted irrationally and had put themselves at risk, so Centuria suggested hiding behind some bushes to avoid being seen. While hiding, they spotted some agents searching for something, and Centuria wondered how they had tracked them down already. Her thoughts were interrupted by Pappy, who suddenly cried out, and when Mia asked what the problem was, the girl explained that she'd spilt water on herself. Mia told her it would dry up, but Sue suddenly began kissing and licking Pappy to get the water off her. At the same time, a worried Kurusu was searching for them in his neighborhood. However, he had to put his search on hold to save a girl in a wheelchair from hitting a street light. The girl, whose name was Maroun, thanked Kurusu for saving her, and after he accepted her appreciation, he told her he had to continue his search for his friends. Surprisingly, Maroun knew where the girls were and offered to take him to them. Back at the park, Centuria told Mia that they had to wait for the men to leave so they could find another place to hide, but Mia pointed out there was no place big enough to hide Centuria's dump truck. While trying to defend herself, Centuria backed into a faucet, breaking it in the process. Just as Mia began teasing her for having an inbuilt wrecking ball, Sue latched onto Centuria's body and began sucking up the water. Before Centuria could let out a shocked scream, Mia covered her mouth and told her to endure it until Sue was done. A few moments later, Kurusu and Maroun arrived and found Mia trying to stop Sue from drying her up with her tongue. But she got distracted when she noticed them, and Sue used it to her advantage. When she was finished, she turned her attention to Maroun, but Kurusu caught and bagged her before she could jump the girl. Later on at home, the girls were surprised to see that a new room had been built, so when Smith arrived, Pappy thanked her for letting Sue stay. Smith feigned ignorance, saying she didn't know who or what she was talking about, so Kurusu asked who the room was for since she didn't want to acknowledge Sue's existence. His question was answered when Maroun was wheeled in, and he became shocked when Maroun, whom he had assumed was a human, revealed that she was one of King Neptune's daughters. Later that day, Kurusu gave Maroun a tour of the house, but Mia got jealous seeing him carrying the girl, so she tried to separate them. This resulted in the three of them falling down the stairs and breaking Maroun's wheelchair. Kurusu scolded Mia for being reckless, and after he carried Maruno back upstairs, Centuria asked Mia why she'd done what she did. She said it was because Maruno was her newest rival, and Centuria asked what proof she had that Maruno wanted Kurusu. Before Mia could respond, Kurusu appeared at the top of the stairs with Maroun still in his arms, and the girls heard her ask him if he had a girlfriend. Kurusu tried to answer, but he somehow slipped and accidentally touched her plots. He immediately tried to explain that it had been an accident, but when Mia noticed that he had Maroun's bikini top in his hand, she got pissed and called him a shameless pig. It was Maroun who then explained that the mucus coating her body was the reason her top slipped off, making Centuria say that the mucus was most likely why Sue tried to attack her earlier. After hearing this, Mia suddenly had an idea and dragged Sue away. When she reappeared before Kurusu, she was covered in Sue's slime, so Kurusu told her to take a bath, which she didn't like because she'd assumed he'd give her his attention when he saw her in that state. After her bath, she complained to Centuria about her concerns over Maroun, but Centuria told her she was overreacting and letting her green-eyed monster control her thoughts and actions. Seeing as Centuria wasn't on her side, Mia decided to take matters into her own hands and mess with Maroun. The first thing she did was turn up the air conditioner, hoping the cold would make the little mermaid uncomfortable, but she soon learned that mermaids were resistant to high temperatures. Mia was the one who ended up freezing, but she refused to give up and tried to pull a talk no jutsu to convince the others to join her vindictive cause. Her plan didn't work because Pappy went to ask Maruno to play video games, leaving Mia feeling betrayed. Unaware of this, Maroun asked Pappy if Kurusu was single, and the simple-minded girl said she didn't know. The question made Centuria skeptical, so she asked Maroun what her intentions with Kurusu were, and Maroun admitted that she wanted to be the Ariel to his Prince Eric. She then asked Centuria if she was Kurusu's girlfriend, catching her off guard, but she quickly regained her composure and denied it, saying she was his servant. This prompted Maroun to compare Centuria to a brave medieval knight who was fiercely loyal to her master, and Centuria began seeing her in a different light. Realizing that Centuria had gone over to the enemy's side, Mia told Maroun that she wouldn't lose Kurusu to a talking fish, and Maroun answered that she didn't intend to snatch him away. When Kurusu walked in, Maroun asked him to take her to her room, and after they left, Centuria told an angry Mia that she had no right to be angry because if she hadn't broken Maroun's wheelchair, Kurusu wouldn't be carrying her everywhere. Mia then admitted that she had always dreamed of being carried like a princess by her prince. However, Centuria didn't see how that could be physically possible, given that she was twice Kurusu's size. When Mia started complaining that Maroun just wanted to seduce Kurusu with her skimpy outfits, Centuria suggested that she put on a bikini. Meanwhile, in Maroun's room, she asked Kurusu if he had a girlfriend. Curious, he asked why she was so interested in his love life. But before she could respond, Mia suddenly burst in, wearing a revealing two-piece swimsuit that barely managed to contain her large jugs. She told them that she wanted to go for a swim and invited Kurusu to join her, but he politely declined. Surprisingly, Mia didn't seem to mind, as she was too busy smugly reveling in the fact that, for once, she was showing more skin than Meroun. At that moment, Centuria entered the room, and when Mia saw her, she lost it and asked why she was showing more skin than her. Centuria answered that it wasn't her fault that she was blessed by the plot gods. Just then, Pappy emerged from beneath Centuria's cloak and asked if anyone had seen Sue. Centuria urged her to come out properly, but Pappy dove back under, tugging the cloak upward and accidentally exposing Centuria. Flushed with embarrassment, Centuria quickly fled the room and slammed the door behind her. Meanwhile, Mia turned her attention back to Kurusu and Meroun, just in time to see the two of them leap into the pool, arms wrapped around each other. Jealous and impulsive, Mia jumped in after them, but the water was far colder and deeper than she expected. As she sank lower, the chill overwhelmed her, and she began to lose consciousness. Through the haze, she heard Kurusu calling her name, and moments later, she opened her eyes to find herself in his arms as they resurfaced. Grateful, she thanked him softly, and Meroun, clearly worried, wrapped Mia in a gentle hug. Suddenly, Sue launched herself onto Kurusu's head, clinging tightly. Meroun calmly noted that Sue was likely dehydrated, which might explain her earlier aggressive behavior. Hearing this, Mia felt a pang of guilt for how she'd acted. Eventually, the two girls went to take a bath together. Mia took the opportunity to apologize for her jealous behavior, but Meroun said she hadn't even noticed. Determined, Mia declared that she would continue to fight for her chance to marry Kurusu. In response, Meroun said she'd gladly cheer her on as long as Mia was willing to accept her as Kurusu's mistress. Days later, while Mia was channeling her inner Gordon Ramsay, her food caught on fire, but she refused Kurusu's offer to put out the fire and did it herself. She then announced that she would be in charge of cooking going forward and started imagining herself married to Kurusu. She was snapped out of her delusional daydream when Kurusu mentioned that the pot was boiling over. Startled, she hastily grabbed the pot with her bare hands and cried out in pain as she got burned. Kurusu stood outside her door, trying to coax her out. He reassured her that she wasn't the first person to fail at cooking and encouraged her to try again. However, Mia insisted she was fine and asked him to leave. Before he could depart, Kurusu spotted something shiny on the floor and wondered if it was a piece of paper. Meanwhile, Mia's concern for her burned hands got the better of her, and she rushed out of the room, accidentally knocking Kurusu down. As Kurusu got to his feet, he was taken aback by Mia's tale and realized she was molting. Mia was mortified, sobbing into her pillow. She admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, that she needed help removing the skin due to her burned hands. Kurusu tried to reassure her, pointing out that he'd already seen her without clothes. However, Mia was adamant that being seen in her birthday suit was preferable to being seen molting. Still, Kurusu insisted on helping, and as he peeled off the skin, she wrapped her tail around his neck because he touched her sensitive spot. This didn't stop Kurusu, and after he peeled off the last bit of skin, he instructed Mia to lie on her back so he could peel off the one in front. Before doing this, Mia covered his eyes with her tail to prevent him from seeing the uncovered entrance to her chamber of secrets. As Kurusu worked, he accidentally touched Mia's sensitive spot again, causing her to slap his hands away, but he didn't stop. She then instructed him to peel from the right, failing to indicate whose right she meant, so Kurusu accidentally put his hands inside her entrance. The clueless idiot had no idea what he'd just done, and before he could finish what he wanted to say, Mia twisted his body, nearly sending him to the other side. To show her appreciation to Kurusu, Mia cooked him dinner, and when Kurusu saw it, he was sure it would be his last meal. However, he was too nice to tell her that her food was unfit for consumption, so he ate the food. He finished eating just as the others returned home, and Centuria asked why the house smelled like a garbage dump, and Mia proudly answered that it was her cooking. Concerned, Centuria asked if she'd gotten the recipe from a cookbook, and Mia said she learned from watching Kurusu cook. She revealed to Kurusu that the girls were the first ones to taste the food, which explained why they looked like they had been puking their guts out all day. Kurusu asked if she'd tasted the food herself, and she said that she didn't because she always lost her appetite when she was molting. Another day, when Kurusu returned home, Pappy informed him that she was about to lay an egg. Immediately, the girls pounced on him, thinking he'd gotten freaky with her without their knowledge, but Pappy explained that it was an unfertilized egg, so they apologized. The next moment, someone rang the doorbell, and when Kurusu answered it, she saw a sleazy-looking man standing there. For some reason, the man, Keisuke, knew that Pappy was about to lay her egg and said he wanted to include it in the documentary he was doing about the interspecies exchange. Instead of telling him to take a hike, they let him into the house to interview them, and he requested to see each girl's room. Meroun was the first to show him her room, and as he filmed her swimming around in the pool, he shamelessly asked if she was wearing underwear. Mia pointed out that his question was as sus as him, but he swore it was all for the sake of the documentary. He then asked Meroun to demonstrate how she got out of the pool, but her top slipped down, baring her chest to everyone. She dove back into the water because she was embarrassed, and Kurusu confronted the man about filming Meroun like that, but he assured him that he'd cut it out while editing. They then went to Centuria's room, and as she attempted to give a tour of the room, he cut her off and asked if she was wearing plot covers. Centuria answered that her species didn't usually wear underwear, so the cultured fool grabbed her melons without warning and claimed it was because he wanted to confirm if she was telling the truth. Immediately, Centuria drew her sword and tried to attack him, but Keisuke said he was doing all that to get answers for the public who wanted to know. After this, he went to Mia's room and also asked if she was wearing underwear. When Mia said she was, he zoomed in on her and told her to show it to him, but she pushed his camera away, making it pan to the bag containing her molted skin. Seeing it, Keisuke asked if he could have it, but Mia refused, so he told her that he wanted it so he could do some research that could be useful in helping her get married to a human. At the mention of marriage, Mia caved and gave Keisuke the molted skin. Just then, Meroun came to inform them that Pappy was about to lay her egg, so they all went to her room and Keisuke set up his camera to capture the moment. He asked Pappy to lift her skirt and instructed Kurusu to get behind her and take off her underwear so he could get a perfect shot of the egg coming out. He then told himself that selling the uncensored footage would make him filthy rich. However, he hadn't realized Sue had attached a tentacle to his head and repeated every word he'd thought out loud, exposing his lies and deceit. Annoyed, the girls demanded he give them all the footage he recorded, along with Mia's molted skin, but Keisuke refused, stating that they belonged to him. Seeing this, Kurusu threw a regular egg at him, and as Keisuke scrambled to catch it, Kurusu punched the fool in the face. As the girls praised Kurusu for his heroism, Meroun called their attention to Pappy, who was about to lay her egg. Everyone gathered around and encouraged her, but Mia covered Kurusu's eyes with her tail, refusing to let him see. That night, while they waited for Mia to finish making dinner, Smith, who had dropped by earlier, approached Kurusu and quietly told him that the name and address on the card the so-called director had given them were fake, but promised to investigate. After that, Kurusu asked Pappy where she had kept her egg, and replied that she had placed it in the refrigerator. Kurusu cautioned that it was a risky move, as someone might mistake it for a regular egg and cook it. At that moment, Mia appeared with an egg in her hand and announced that they were having boiled eggs. Meanwhile, elsewhere in an apartment, Keisuke sat rolling thread while lamenting his losses. A spider demi-human, noticing him, asked if he needed help. He snapped at her to be quiet and not get cocky, as her thread was profitable for him. When he demanded that she arrange the thread in one place, she wrapped him up in it instead. Another day, somewhere in the city, some orcs held the employees and customers of a bookstore hostage. The police couldn't do anything because of the interspecies bill, so Smith told the police chief to leave everything to her team. The chief wasn't ecstatic about leaving the job to Smith, given her track record of incompetence and carelessness, but he agreed because they had no other choice. Just then, shots rang out inside the store. It turned out that the leader of the orcs sensed someone hiding in the ceiling and shot her. After she fell, he contacted the command center and informed them that he'd disposed of the agent they sent. This annoyed the chief, but before he could fly off the rails, Smith asked him to calm down, assuring him that everything was going according to plan. Back inside the store, the orcs dragged a high schooler who they found hiding to the front of the store, and when she saw the dead agent, she screamed. She attempted to run out of the store, but the door wouldn't budge, and as she struggled against it, pulling on the blinds, the leader approached her. Unknown to him, the open blinds allowed the sniper sitting on a faraway building to gain access to the bookstore, and they opened fire. The shots destroyed the orcs' weapons before they realized what was happening. As they tried to figure out what to do, someone dressed in a suit of armor burst through the wall and took out the orcs closest to him. It wasn't until after he helped the hostages escape and took off his armor that they realized that their assailant was a female ogre. The piggies cowered in fear, but their leader told them to stop embarrassing him and man up. The next moment, the dead agent came back to life and opened fire on them. One of the orcs came up behind her and attempted to squeeze the life out of her, but she turned her gun against herself and shot him. Fortunately, they were rubber bullets, so he was unharmed. However, they wanted to know how she was still alive, so she revealed that she was a zombie. When she turned her attention to the leader, he tried using the high schooler as a shield. The girl suddenly raised her leg and kicked him in the face before changing into a girl with long silver hair. Since all their identities had been revealed, Smith, who had come in, introduced them as Mon, a team of demi-humans specially trained to handle cases involving other demi-humans within the law. She then aimed her gun at the leader and demanded he surrender, which he did. However, he told her that all they could do was deport him. In response, Smith suddenly shot at him, so he accused her of violating the exchange bill laws, but Smith calmly replied that she hadn't been the one who fired. That's when he realized the shape-shifting demi-human had taken on Smith's appearance. Later, Keisuke, still wrapped in a spider web, managed to call the police, who sent over the Mon girls. Unfortunately, they were unable to capture the spider demi-human after she slipped out of the house and avoided being shot by the sniper. Meanwhile, at Kurusu's house, Smith warned the girls to be careful because there was a fugitive demi-human spider on the run. Just then, they noticed Pappy and Sue bringing in various items, so they questioned where they had found them. The girls explained that they had discovered them outside the house, so everyone rushed outside and found everything as described, but noticed Kurusu's shoe lying among the items. At that time, Kurusu awoke in an abandoned warehouse and wondered why he was hanging upside down from the ceiling. His abductor was revealed to be the spider demi-human, and she introduced himself as Rachnara. Unbothered, Kurusu asked her to cut him down because his brain was about to get flooded with his blood. Rachnara cut him down, and when he tried to avoid her because he noticed her plots were visible, she assumed he was scared of her. Before she could speak, a security guard came in, so she grabbed Kurusu and climbed to the ceiling. Their closeness made Kurusu's body react to her, and when she noticed it, she began teasing him about it. He tried to speak up, but she gagged him with her webs, so all the guard heard were his muffled sounds, and it scared him off. Seeing as they were now alone, Rachnara got bolder and pushed Kurusu's face into her chest, and when she noticed his face was beet red, she dropped him. As he dangled from the ceiling, she got all freaky, and as she played with him, Kurusu tried his best not to cream his pants. In his desperate bid, he bit down on the web and cut himself loose, but he didn't fall because his feet were still bound. Eventually, Rachnara set him free, and instead of trying to run, he asked why she wasn't with her host family. She explained that her host family had sold her to Keisuke, who just took advantage of her to make money. He tried to sympathize with her, but she told him she didn't need his pity and said he was just like everyone else. When she mentioned that he was only attracted to her human parts, Kurusu surprised her by saying she had stunning legs. Hearing this, Rachnara called him a cultured freak and said he was nothing but an inexperienced loser because of how affected he'd been by her. Suddenly, the place was enveloped by a bright light, and Smith's voice could be heard from outside. At first, Kurusu didn't understand why Smith came with her agents, but Rachnara explained that it was because of her. Hearing this, he advised her to flee, but she refused and said his attempt to help her made her like him more. Eventually, when things cooled down, Smith apologized to Rachnara for neglecting her and allowing Keisuke to mistreat her. Rachnara then hinted that she wanted to stay with Kurusu, making Smith happy since she wasn't ready to stress herself looking for a new home. Days after Rachnara moved in, Mia attempted to rally the other girls against her because she considered Rachnara to be her newest rival. However, she noticed them getting along with Rachnara. Centuria was the only one who wasn't kissing up to the spider, but to Mia's dismay, she expressed that she had no problem with Rachnara's presence in the house. Just then, Kurusu finished doing the dishes and tried to leave the kitchen, but Centuria made it her mission to stick close to him. When he asked if everything was okay, Centuria claimed she was simply doing her duty as his servant and stated that she would follow him everywhere. Kurusu then awkwardly mentioned he needed to use the bathroom, so Centuria turned around, feeling embarrassed. Outside the bathroom door, Mia tried to persuade Centuria that Rachnara couldn't be trusted. In response, Centuria told her not to behave like humans and to stop judging others based solely on appearances. Suddenly, they heard Kurusu cry out, prompting them to rush into the bathroom to investigate. Upon entering, they found Kurusu tied up, with Rachnara standing next to him, but all she offered was a half-hearted explanation. Later that night, Kurusu was about to lie down on his bed when he got caught in Rachnara's web. Rachna jumped down from the ceiling and announced that she wanted to teach him how to be a man. Using her webs, she sealed off the door to prevent any interruptions, but before she could begin, Centuria burst through the door, pulled Kurusu out of the web, and leapt out of the window. As they galloped down the street, Centuria noticed that people were staring at them strangely. Kurusu tried to tell her that their attention was mostly on her jiggling jugs, but she didn't give him a chance to explain. She was busy scolding herself for judging Rachna based on her appearance, just as humans often judged them. When they finally came to a stop, he got off her back, but the same annoying couple that always seemed to run into Kurusu arrived with a group of people. They laughed when they saw Centuria and began to mock her, making stupid and derogatory comments. Kurusu attempted to defend her, but Centuria insisted he shouldn't waste his time on worthless lowlives. The group then turned their attention to Kurusu, so Centuria pulled out her sword to threaten them, but the man laughed and reminded her that the law was on his side. The next moment, some of his friends grabbed Kurusu, and others seized Centuria. However, before he could do anything to her, Rachna intervened, tying him and his friends up. Although he was frightened, he tried to put on a brave face and said he would report them to the police. Rachna approached him and challenged him to try his luck, but he became so scared that he passed out. When Centuria mentioned that they could get in trouble for hurting Kurusu, Rachna brushed off her concerns, saying it was fine as long as no one found out. Centuria then thanked her, but Rachna didn't respond as she was too busy tying Kurusu up. The next moment, she suggested that they find a motel to spend the night. But Centuria, not trusting the spider girl to keep her hands off Kurusu's tool, kicked Rachna and took Kurusu back. This made Rachna complain, but Centuria didn't care, and in a heated moment, she suddenly shouted that she hated Rachna. Already used to having haters, Rachna just laughed and said she was glad Centuria finally spoke her mind. She admitted she disliked it when people pretended to get along and told Centuria that it was okay to dislike someone. Centuria was taken aback, and as she watched Rachna and Kurusu walk away, she realized that Rachna was someone she could trust. The next day, Kurusu came down with a fever, so Mia decided that she would be the one to nurse him back to health. However, Smith burst through the window and ordered the girls out of the room. She explained that he might have contracted a virus, and if he wasn't quarantined, it could spread to the girls and potentially cause a pandemic. Smith then declared that she would take on the responsibility of nursing him. Unfortunately, she proved to be as useful as a pistol without bullets because it didn't take long for her to fall asleep. Seeing this, Mia insisted on caring for Kurusu herself, but Centuria reminded her of the danger of infection. On the other hand, Miran thought it would be a perfect opportunity to achieve her tragic ending. Ignoring her, they decided to send the only person who wasn't at risk of getting infected, Sue. Sue knocked on Kurusu's door, and he invited her in, mistakenly thinking she was Centuria. When he saw Sue, he was surprised as he hadn't expected the girls to use Sue's mimicry ability to their advantage. They had taught her how to take care of him, and not only did she mimic their voices, but she also imitated each girl's unique way of caring for him. It wasn't until Sue read Kurusu's thoughts that she discovered he had fallen ill because he had gone out in the rain to search for her. As she continued to read his thoughts, she realized he needed water, so she gave him some. When Kurusu came to his senses, he noticed that she was breastfeeding him. Surprised, he moved back and realized he was feeling better. He then asked Sue if she was the one who had taken care of him, but she remained silent. As he thanked her, the girls burst into the room, asking if he was okay. Kurusu replied that he was fine thanks to Sue, which prompted them to praise her. Then, to everyone's surprise, Sue spoke up. She apologized to Kurusu for being the reason he fell sick and declared her love for him. While the others were astonished by her ability to speak, Mia was particularly concerned about Sue's declaration of love. Just then, Smith walked into the room and asked why everyone was there. However, before they could answer, she sneezed, prompting everyone to keep their distance from her. Days later, Kurusu met up with Smith at a cafe to discuss some issues. However, the two had no idea the girls had secretly followed Kurusu. As they stood outside observing them, Mia complained that Kurusu was cheating on her, but Centuria told her to stop acting like they were truly an item. Additionally, she said that they had no way of knowing why Smith and Kurusu met because they couldn't go inside the cafe without drawing attention to themselves. Suddenly, they turned to look at Sue and were struck with an idea, which involved exploiting the poor slime. They attempted to use her ability to spy on Smith and Kurusu so they could find out if they were really on a date. Unfortunately, their mission wasn't going well, and they faced numerous challenges. Mia was the only one who managed to get close to their target, but she lost them when they entered a love motel. While she was sneaking around, Ratchnera suddenly appeared and startled her, calling her pathetic for spying on Kurusu. Ignoring her words, Mia asked why Ratchnera had followed her, and Ratchnera revealed she was motivated by the same reasons she'd followed Smith and Kurusu. Ratchnera then attached her webs to the windows and used them to listen in on the conversations below. When she located Smith and Kurusu by their voices, she moved to interrupt them. Mia tried to stop her, but Ratchnera was determined to catch them in a compromising situation to use as leverage for blackmail. As Mia attempted to pull Ratchnera down, the window suddenly opened, and they were pulled inside. To their surprise, they found themselves face to face with the entire Mon squad, including Smith and Kurusu. Smith later explained that Kurusu had received a threatening letter, and she'd planned a fake date to draw out the culprit. However, since the girls had decided to crash the date, she suggested that Kurusu take the girls on dates instead to see if the culprit would make a move. The first date was with Mia and Meraun. However, Mia made it clear that she disliked the idea of Meraun being there. Meraun, on the other hand, assured Mia that she was only there to act as a wingman and nothing more. Kurusu tried to warn them to act normal when he noticed Tio, who was supposed to be their bodyguard for the day, drawing attention to herself because of her size. They headed to the aquarium, where the staff treated Meraun like royalty. Inside, Meraun handed them a free pass and then left them to explore on their own. They visited several exhibitions, and when they reached one in particular, Mia pointed out two fishes that looked like they were kissing. This somehow led to an intense moment between her and Kurusu, and just as they were about to lock lips, Meraun unexpectedly appeared, interrupting them to share facts about fish. The two immediately jumped apart, and an enraged Mia attempted to strangle Meraun. Afterwards, they went to the dolphin show, where they discovered that Meraun was one of the performers. Just as Mia told Kurusu that they shouldn't attract attention to themselves, Meraun called out to her from the stage, making her cringe. As they watched the performance, Kurusu admired Meraun and didn't notice that Mia had walked away in jealousy. While grumbling about Kurusu, she bumped into a lizardman, who invited her to hang out with him. Tio informed Smith about the situation and warned her to keep an eye on Mia, as the culprit might be targeting the girls by using Kurusu as an excuse. As Mia and the lizardman sat on a boat in the middle of a lake, Mia recounted how her date with Kurusu had been until she left. The lizardman expressed his disdain, calling Kurusu an inconsiderate jerk for bringing another girl along. Mia defended Kurusu, but the lizardman criticized her for believing the words of a worthless human. This sudden shift in his attitude surprised Mia, but she didn't point it out. The lizardman then insisted that he and Mia belonged together, claiming that if Kurusu was the only obstacle between them, he would eliminate him. This prompted Mia to ask why he was being delusional and possessive. Additionally, she pointed out that although lizardmen were similar to Lammy, they weren't necessarily the same. However, the lizardman revealed that he was a dragon newt, making Mia recall that the culprit had signed the letter with the initial D. As soon as he attempted to touch her, Kurusu steered a paddle boat toward them and collided with the side of their boat. After he helped Mia out of the water, the furious dragon newt swam over and began yelling at them. Tired of his pointless rants, Mia threw a can at him, causing him to fall back into the water. Kurusu walked over and tried to help the newt remove his wet clothes. However, when he unbuttoned his shirt, he was surprised to discover that the dragon newt was actually a girl. Embarrassed, she quickly covered herself and admitted that she had approached Mia because she wanted to befriend her. Mia then asked why she had sent the threatening letter, but the girl claimed she knew nothing about it and flew away, vowing revenge. Feeling something poking her from inside Kurusu's jacket, which was wrapped around her shoulder, Mia became curious. Kurusu then took the item out and asked her to turn around. When she did, he placed a necklace around her neck, saying he thought it would look nice on her. Overjoyed, she wrapped him in a bone-crushing hug. Meanwhile, Smith had captured the dragon newt and discovered she hadn't been the one to send the letter. Since their first plan to capture the mysterious D had failed, Smith came up with a new plan. This time, she had Kurusu organize a cookout in the middle of a forest with Pappy and Sue, all because Pappy had mentioned that she wanted to visit the place. Out of curiosity, Kurusu asked Pappy why she wanted to come there, and the pea-brained girl said she couldn't remember why. Turning his attention away from her, Kurusu noticed that Zambina, who was their bodyguard of the day, was feasting on all the meat he'd grilled. Kurusu rushed towards her, asking if she was Luffy in disguise, and as they argued about the meat, they heard a loud sound before an ugly monster showed up. When it attacked, Kirusu grabbed the girls and ran, but didn't fail to note that the monster resembled a mutated tree. Upon hearing this, the lights in Pappy's brain came back on, and she suddenly remembered why she'd insisted on coming to the forest. The next moment, Kirusu was snatched up by the monster, so he dropped Sue and asked her to go get help. The monster attempted to stop her by stepping on her, but Sue jumped out of the way in time and accidentally fell into a tank of toxic waste. Since she was no longer perceived as a problem, the tree monster parted its head to reveal that it was a hydra. As it began squeezing the life out of Kirusu, Pappy addressed her, referring to her as Ki and pleaded with her not to hurt him. Surprised, Kirusu questioned Pappy's relationship with his attacker, and she explained that she'd planted Ki in the forest after finding her on the side of the road. Kirusu then asked why Ki had gotten so big, and Pappy said it was because she had most likely absorbed some of the toxic waste in the area after freeing herself. Pappy tried to convince Ki to let Kirusu go, but because the Hydra was so confused, she didn't recognize Pappy and hit her. Kirusu warned Pappy to be careful, but she said Ki was angry because she had forgotten her, so she had to make things right. Sue tried to approach her again, but Ki hit her, sending her flying across the forest. Fortunately, she landed on Sue, who had turned into a Godzilla ripoff, and after ensuring that Pappy was fine, she approached Ki and took Kirusu back. She then told Kirusu that extracting the toxic waste from Ki was the only way to calm her down, making him realize that the toxic waste hadn't just made her grow, but it also made her smart. As Sue and Ki fought, Pappy and Kirusu held on for their dear lives until Pappy was thrown off and landed on Ki's pillowy plots. As she sat there, she decided that the only way to extract the toxins from Ki was to suck on her plots. When Ki pulled her off, she begged Kirusu to take over and save Ki, so he did. Soon after, Smith arrived, and after Kirusu told her that the toxic waste had caused Ki to go out of control, he begged her not to punish her for it. Smith said she wouldn't and informed him that Ki didn't send the letter because she couldn't write. She then promised to clean up the waste and asked Ki if she wanted to remain in the forest, to which she said yes. Days later, Kirusu took Centaurea on a date, but for some reason, she was dressed in full body armor, which drew unnecessary attention towards them. However, she didn't care. Minako, who was the Mon bodyguard for the day, called Centaurea and advised her to ditch the armor, but the centaur refused to listen to her. Just then, a young girl approached Minako and asked what she was doing. Minako tried to cover her eye, but the girl noticed it and ran away, traumatized. Minako felt disturbed by the encounter, but the little girl hid behind a door and laughed, saying she didn't want Minako to interfere with her plans for Centaurea. Meanwhile, Kirusu and Centaurea were on a picnic. As Kirusu took a bite of the sandwiches she had made, Centaurea asked if he liked them. Kirusu replied yes, even though his expression suggested otherwise. At that moment, Ratchnara, who had stolen one of the sandwiches, told Kirusu to stop lying and admit that Centaurea's sandwiches tasted like sawdust. Disappointed by this review, Centaurea excused herself and walked away. When she stopped by a tree, Lilith flew up to her face and hypnotized her. When Kirusu found her in her hypnotized state, she attempted to overpower him. Despite his efforts to stop her, his body betrayed him, resulting in a severe nosebleed. Lilith watched from behind some bushes, amazed that her hypnosis had worked so well. Suddenly, she heard a noise, and when she turned around, she came face to face with a wild boar that Pumba would have wished to be like. Startled, she took off screaming, with the wild boar chasing after her. This commotion also helped Centaurea regain her senses. Kirusu noticed Lilith's predicament and threw his jacket at the pig's face, causing it to crash into a tree. Believing it was unconscious, he turned his back, but the boar quickly got back up and tried to attack him. Fortunately, Centaurea managed to knock it out using a log. Kirusu praised her for her bravery, but Centaurea felt she had only caused him trouble and insisted she wasn't fit to stay by his side. Instead of answering her, Kirusu climbed onto her back, claiming he had sprained his ankle. Centaurea remarked that she was only useful as a regular horse. However, Kirusu hugged her and assured her that, regardless of her perceived usefulness, she could never be as useless as Yamcha. Meanwhile, Ratchnara had tied Lilith up and decided to take her sweet time to torture her. The plan to draw out the mysterious D continued, and this time, Kirusu had to go on dates with the girls from the Mon squad. The first date was with Tio, and Kirusu nearly dropped dead from being dragged from one place to another. She took him to a clothing store and asked his opinion on the dress. Tio was taller than he was, so when he turned around, He came face to face with her nearly exposed racks and his brain malfunctioned. Tio stormed off to the changing room after taking offense at Kurusu's reaction. But when she began struggling to remove the skirt, which got stuck at her hips, she had to call him for help. As he tugged on the skirt, he accidentally pulled down her underwear as well, exposing her buttocks. Mortified, Kurusu apologized profusely and sat outside. Tio continued sobbing, lamenting that she loved the skirt but couldn't find it in her size. Kurusu offered to adjust the skirt to fit her, and she emerged from the dressing room, embracing him in gratitude. However, she quickly realized she was only in her underwear and hastily retreated into the dressing room. Just then, Zambina called to ask if they'd seen anyone suspicious, and Kurusu replied that they hadn't. Zambina then chuckled, saying that with Tio's intimidating presence, it was unlikely anyone would approach them. Zambina took over the date, and the two went to watch his zombie movie. How ironic. As they walked, Zambina noticed her hand had fallen off, scaring those around them, so they found a cafe, and Kurusu helped her sew it back. She asked why he wasn't disgusted, and he said there was nothing wrong with her. Zambina laughed it off but decided to tease him and dropped one of her racks. Kurusu picked it up, but when he realized what it was, he nearly died from shock. Zambina couldn't hold it in and burst out laughing before asking him to help sew it back on. While he did that, he stupidly asked if she was in pain, and Zambina reminded him that she was a zombie. Just then, Kurusu noticed blood on the floor and asked Zambina if she was bleeding. Zambina said she was fine, and that's when they realized he had gotten a nosebleed from all the excitement. Later on, Minako took the lead on the date but chose to walk behind Kurusu instead of beside him. Kurusu turned around and reminded her that they were on a date, so she didn't need to keep her distance. She then slowly made her way toward him, but clumsily bumped into every object in her path. When she finally reached him, she asked if they could go somewhere private. This made Kurusu think she wanted to get to know him better, but she explained that she felt uncomfortable in crowded places. While they sat on a bench, Minako wondered if Kurusu was only pretending to be nice, so she decided to test him to see if his eyes would reveal his true thoughts. She called his attention and asked him to look at her, which he did. However, she didn't see any signs of hate or fear in his gaze, and soon felt overwhelmed by the prolonged eye contact. When Kurusu asked if she was okay, she told him not to look at her, leaving him confused about her hot and cold behavior. Just then, she noticed a hooded figure watching them and confronted the person, but they fled. Zambina emerged from the bushes, guns blazing, and shot at the figure, but they dodged the bullets. As a last resort, Tio picked up a vending machine and threw it, blocking the figure's path, which allowed Minako to shoot a tranquilizer dart at them. However, when they removed the hood, they discovered it was Doppel. That evening, as the squad headed home, Doppel revealed that the threat had been fabricated by her and Smith to force Kurusu into a relationship with one of the girls. She asked her friends if they'd enjoyed spending time with Kurusu, and they all shared their positive experiences, praising him. Zambina wondered why a second letter would be different from the first, but Doppel claimed she'd only sent one. Meanwhile, Kurusu encountered a strange person on his way home. When he arrived, the girls asked if he'd caught the culprit, but instead, he pointed to a headless person standing next to him. The girls screamed, and Mia tried to pull Kurusu to safety, but ended up falling along with the headless body. When she looked up, she saw the vacant space where the head should have been and screamed before fainting. In the living room, the girls asked Kurusu about the headless person's identity, so he explained how he'd found her on the street and brought her home because he couldn't leave her alone. When he announced that he was going out to search for her head, Ratchnera suggested waiting until morning, given the late hour, but he was determined to find it immediately. Following his declaration, the girls, except Ratchnera, offered to accompany him on the search. As they searched the area for clues, they suddenly heard Mia's scream piercing the air. Immediately, Kurusu and Centuria rushed to her side, and she frantically pointed at a head. Kurusu reassured her it was just a mannequin's head. However, Centuria's attempt to comfort Mia only made things worse, as she creepily mentioned they were searching for a severed head. Kurusu shot her a disapproving look, warning her that such comments could lead to trouble. Before they could breathe a sigh of relief, Mia screamed again. This time, they found her unconscious on the floor, lying beside the actual head they were searching for. Centuria quickly took Mia away, instructing Kurusu to retrieve the head. Kurusu hesitated to touch the severed head, so he tried talking to it first. The head remained silent until he picked it up, and then it suddenly spoke, claiming to be a Dullahan. The head continued talking, but Kurusu wasn't interested in the details. When she finished speaking, Kurusu asked what she wanted, and she begged him to reunite her with her body. As Kurusu left the park with the head, he spotted a security guard approaching and quickly hid behind a tree. The head suddenly started making strange noises, so he asked what was wrong, and she said someone was messing with her body. Kurusu warned her to keep her voice down, but instead, she began making loud, happy noises. Kurusu had to cover her mouth with his hand to silence her, and just when it seemed like she was about to hit a high note, she suddenly fell silent. When they got home, he reattached her head to her body, and the girls offered her a cup of tea and some snacks. While watching her, Centaurea explained to Mia that Dullahans are headless knights who appear when someone is near death. When Kurusu overheard this, he asked if Dullahan was in their house because someone was going to die soon. Dullahan said yes and then pointed at Kurusu, saying that he was the one who was going to die soon. The room fell silent after Dullahan's declaration. She explained that Kurusu's life had been in danger numerous times and, as the hunter of death, she had come to collect his soul. However, Ratchnara cut her off, tying her up and ordering Pappy to take Kurusu to safety. As Pappy flew away with Kurusu, he struggled to breathe with her backside and his face. He tried to pull his face out by grabbing her hip, but his distraction caused Pappy to fly straight through a billboard, and Kurusu fell. Luckily, Sue caught him just in time. The other girls soon arrived, and seeing Kurusu still in danger, Centaurea promised to protect him. She revealed a saddle attached to her back, designed for long-distance travel. Before Kurusu climbed on, Centaurea delivered a lengthy speech about honor and dishonor, and when she finished, Kurusu mounted her back, and they galloped away to safety. As they were making their way, Centaurea turned a corner and nearly collided head-on with the annoying couple from before. However, she managed to jump over the truck, leaving it to crash and burn behind them. She maintained her pace and soon began to imagine a life on the run with Kurusu. However, she didn't realize that Kurusu was fighting for his life. He had slipped off the saddle and was being dragged along by his foot behind her. When she finally noticed, she stopped running and apologized. At that moment, Dullahan appeared behind her and urged her to give up. Suddenly, Maraun emerged from the river and took Kurusu with her. Maraun dove underwater, and Kurusu desperately tried to tell her that he couldn't breathe. He managed to swim to the edge to catch his breath, and Maraun approached him, saying that since he was destined to die, she wanted something to remember him by. Kurusu's face turned red as he asked if she was referring to an object, and Maraun confirmed his fears, claiming there was no greater tragedy than having his child after he had died. Kurusu rebuked her, but the fish girl was determined to become his baby mama, so she pulled him into the water again. She didn't even care that he was drowning, but before he passed out, Mia's tail suddenly wrapped around Maraun's gills, suffocating her. She then pulled Kurusu out of the water and squeezed his body to get him to cough up water. When he regained consciousness, Ratchnara used her web to restrain Mia, and when Mia noticed Dullahan standing next to her, she accused her of being a traitor. Ratchnara said there was no point trying to save Kurusu because he was bound to die anyway. Mia said that if they were going to isekai Kurusu, they had to do it to her first. Tired of watching them, Kurusu said he could not believe they had fallen for the lies of a crazy person they had just met. He stood up, walked into the street to stand in front of Truck Kun. Fortunately, it was a toy version of him, and this proved that Dullahan was a cap lord and nothing more. When they returned home, Smith explained that Dullahan, whose real name was Lala, tended to be overly dramatic. She then asked why Lala had run away. In response, Lala explained that she had been curious about Kurusu. She had seen him on the brink of death so many times that she couldn't believe he had survived each time. Therefore, she decided to take it upon herself to help him cross over to the other side. Smith looked as though she were about to banish Lala to the underworld after hearing this. However, she only reminded her of the consequences of harming a human. Feeling scared, Lala hid behind Kurusu and pleaded to live with them instead of returning with Smith. Smith, immediately adopting her charming smile, agreed to this request. Kurusu protested, but the girls seemed supportive of the idea. Days later, Kurusu reviewed their finances and was shocked to discover they were nearly broke. To make matters worse, Mia had cleared out the fridge in her attempts to cook her inedible dishes. Kurusu then took the girls, excluding Mia, Ratchnara, and Lala, to buy groceries. But the store was closed, so Centaurea suggested they try the food market instead. At the market, the vendors began packing up, assuming their products would offend the demi-humans. Kurusu reassured them that they ate meat and vegetables just like anyone else, despite their part animal nature. Maron wandered into a fish stall, admiring the selection and complimenting the vendor on his taste. The owner felt as though he was in the presence of royalty as he listened to her, so he quickly offered her his best catch of fish. Kurusu declined, explaining that they had no money, but the man insisted and gave them some smaller fish instead. As they walked through the market, Centuria approached a vegetable stall, and the owner offered her some carrots. After she tasted them, she felt as if she had entered paradise and praised the woman for her high-quality produce. The owner then offered her a box of vegetables, but Kurusu declined on her behalf. However, the woman insisted, and they eventually accepted it. Soon after, other vendors came forward to offer them free food. Kurusu wondered how they would transport all the items, so Maron suggested that Centuria carry them. Centuria hesitated at first, saying she didn't want to be treated like a pack horse, but she ultimately agreed when Kurusu asked her to help. When only he and Sue remained, he mentioned that he needed more food because he wasn't sure if what they had would be enough. Sue reassured him, saying he didn't need to worry about feeding her since food wasn't very important to her. However, he expressed his desire for everyone to eat together as a family. Sue then led him to the forest and asked Kiai if they could harvest some plants. Initially, Kiai seemed hesitant to allow them. In a playful attempt to persuade her, Sue grabbed Kiai and started sucking on her oranges. Kurusu managed to pull Sue away and questioned her actions. Sue explained that she thought Kiai wanted a favor in return for letting them take the plants. Kiai then took them to an area where some plants were growing. However, Kurusu pointed out that some of the plants were poisonous and that it would be challenging to identify which ones were safe to eat. Just as he decided to head back, he noticed Sue sampling the plants. She confidently informed him which ones were poisonous and which ones were safe. After gathering enough plants, they bid Kiai farewell and headed home. As they walked home, they encountered the dragon newt, and she tried to attack Kurusu, but Sue sprayed her with the poison she had absorbed from eating all those poison plants. Later that night, after Kurusu served dinner, Smith and the Mon squad arrived, demanding that he feed them as well. Kurusu had no choice but to prepare more food for them, which left the fridge empty once again. Noticing Kurusu's miserable expression, Smith asked what was wrong. Sue explained that Kurusu was too poor to afford food. Smith then informed Kurusu that the government would reimburse him for all the money he spent feeding the girls, as long as he kept the receipts. This shocked Kurusu, as he couldn't believe she had forgotten to mention such an important detail. Which monster girl would you like to get to know better? If you've watched up to this point and loved the video, comment Mia-chan. Also, check out the next video. See you guys in the next video.